roughly an hour and a half north of Ottawa. So myself being from Windsor, the weekend commute was exceptional, and that was even more of a strain. Family-wise, it was a very tough time. At the deployment, more so. Honestly, I really think the families that are back home are the real heroes in these things, because I know for myself, if I'm going outside the wire, I'm going on patrol, I know what I'm up against. I know if it's super bad, I know what I'm gonna do when things go sideways, and they've got nothing. All they've got is looking at the phone and hoping to God it never rings, or someone in a dress uniform doesn't show up on your door. That's it, and that's infinitely worse. I think that's just the toughest thing for any family to try to deal with. My kids were of an age where, like, they're about 3-4 years old, they young enough that they won't remember that, it was tough not having dad around, but old enough to not be babies and, not make it super hard on mom.
Now you said that it's interesting, but I want to make sure we clarify this for those watching. For family background, you're just hoping the phone doesn't ring, or someone in a dress uniform shows up to their door. And you think, why would you want the phone to ring? Wouldn't your wife want to hear from you? You mean something else. Maybe you could just describe that briefly, what you meant. I know what you mean, but for the sake of the audience, what do you mean by that?
And again, if in the event that someone is killed overseas, then the military would put together a group to go give notification of the death, and would show up to pass on the information, and then to provide support throughout the whole funeral process. Or the phone call, it's either that you're hurt or something's gone badly.
If it's not your voice on the line, it's not usually good news.
No, not generally.
See, I think that's a chilling thing that you say, when the families are the real heroes. Like, that's, they're living day to day. You're not there, and then the phone rings. Could it be, that call? You also made a comment that other vets have made. When you're outside the wire, what do you mean by that phrase, outside the wire? If you have to venture outside the wire, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. For myself, I was deployed to a district called Maiwand, which was the westernmost area of operations in Kandahar. It's right on the Helmand border. And around the Kandahar area, we had, you'll hear the term FOB, which is a forward operations base. And it's just like a little mini base. It's got walls and a gate, and ours was decent. It had a helipad, and there was actually an American company working out of there, as well as a police mentor team who were actually there on Operation Enduring Freedom, a different mission but in the same area. Mm-hmm. And outside the wire specifically refers to once you leave the safety of your little base or big base, depending on where you're posted, and you're out in the countryside, and you're exposing yourself to an enemy attack.
Okay. The training that you received, do you feel that adequately prepared you for your deployment and everything you had to do when you were in Afghanistan?
Yeah, again, 8 months. That was a long time to go over stuff, but it was during that time, again, specifically for us, because of the nature of the job that we were going to be doing, received advanced cultural training. We also, because of the potential to do projects, again, as to help out people, we were qualified under the Financial Administration Act of Canada to spend public funds, multi-source project development, a lot of financial stuff that I personally am not all that familiar with, but got to be proficient at, and fitness, very advanced medical, like combat casualty care training. There's just a huge spectrum of knowledge that we received before we actually put boots on the ground.
I guess that's important. You know, you can't really over-prepare for something like this. You can certainly under-prepare, which would be, you know, consequential in a negative way. You've been back now. It's been a few years since your deployment there. Do you feel that Canada, particularly the role that you served, but other Canadians at the time that you served, have completed their objectives there, or at least moved the pylon along, so to speak? And if so, did you see any signs of impact in that regard?
It's not my place to speak to any political objectives, which may or may not have been achieved. As far as what I did and effects on the ground,
that's more what I mean.
Yeah.
Do you reach people individually or as a group in your deployment and in the capacity that you serve?
Did I go over there and convince them that the Canadian way is going to be the way for them? No. Are there people there that believe that there are parts of the world that do care about them, that left their homes and their families and put their lives on the line to their benefit? Yeah. And in a country where so much is passed on word of mouth and deeds speak very loudly, that's going to be undeniable. That we made an effort. We didn't have to go there. Again, and the whole idea of a volunteer army as well. Like, no citizen is forced to be a soldier. We all choose to do that job. Therefore, every single person who went to Afghanistan went there because they wanted to, and they had an interest in helping. That can't go badly. People can debate whether it was effective. People can talk endlessly whether we did it right or if we could have done it better. It doesn't negate the fact that for the folks that I met and dealt with face to face, they appreciated us being there. And there's going to be at least some generations of Afghans that knew that we stepped up and we did what we could for those guys.
To try and wrap things up here, Ken, what do you feel perhaps is the single greatest message or point that you could convey to others, other Canadians of all ages, but particularly young people? What's the single greatest point that you, from your experience, that you feel you can make for them to take hold of?
You know what? I think if there's any one thing, there's a very popular phrase that I believe the Royal Canadian Regiment at least pushed, if not developed on their own. It's never pass a fault. And that, I think, should permeate all of our lives in every possible facet. At such time as you see something that is wrong, take ownership and do something with it. Whether it's helping someone pick up groceries or going to a war-torn country and trying to help someone get their life back on track. Never pass a fault. If everybody does that, I think we're going to do all right.
Excellent. Good point. Ken, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. With me is Staff Sergeant John Richards. John is a 30-plus year veteran of the Windsor Police Service who also has time spent in Canadian military. John, thanks for joining us today. I'm wondering if you can kick things off by just telling us what your specific role is when you served in Afghanistan.
First off, I do have military experience. That was long in my past, about 30 years ago, I'm afraid. But my service in Afghanistan wasn't in a military capacity. It was through the International Peace Operations branch of the RCMP. The Department of Foreign Affairs has missions various countries around the world for various reasons, one of which, and one of the largest of which, is in Afghanistan. And that's where I served. So this was drawing on your police experience? Correct. I went there as a police officer. I went there as a Windsor police officer. I wore a Windsor police flash on one side and a Canadian flash on the other side of my shoulder, on the other shoulder. And my duties there were to mentor and to train Afghan police, mostly in the higher ranking area. I mentored a district police chief in Kabul, Police District 3. It's one of the nicer districts in Kabul. It's in a university district, and a lot of government people live in the area, that sort of thing. So it was a nicer area.
Now, when you're saying mentoring, you went over there not knowing perhaps the extent of what you were going to face, and how would you compare the circumstances in terms of, you come from an organization that has substantial training standards and whatnot that are regimented for all police services in Ontario and Canada. You're a long-serving police officer. You go to a foreign country that needs that kind of expertise. There must have been some kind of a gap, perhaps huge, between what you had grown accustomed to here in Canada compared to what they had to start off with out there. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's like night and day. They basically had no structured procedures or that sort of thing. They had facilities that were rebuilt by various organizations over there. Equipment was donated to them. And in our case, I suppose we were donating training and mentoring and experience.
So did you find you were, I'll use the term starting from scratch to some degree with a lot of what you were going to convey to some of these folks over there?
Well, when I arrived there, this particular part of the mission was going on for quite a long period of time. I wasn't there at the beginning.
Okay.
So I got there, well, actually I served there through most of 2011. So most of the stuff was in place, most of the programs and everything that we were doing. However, they had to be refined and delivered, and we had to do need studies, that sort of thing, and act on them. We created training programs from scratch, as a matter of fact, in some cases.
Did you try to mirror training programs and protocols and techniques you learned here, but maybe with some kind of modification based on the circumstances, or?
Oh, absolutely. You always bring your own training with you. I served with a European Union police mission, so it wasn't just Canadians there. There was police officers from all over the world, and everybody wanted to have it basically their way. So a lot of times you had to bring your best case scenario forward and explain why you think this would work better. We have to remember that they don't have the infrastructure and whatnot that we have here in Canada, so a lot of the things we do are simply not going to work there.
Right.
And that was a message that had to be passed back and forth amongst all the international police services that are doing this, that we have to work down at their level. We can't...
Kind of reality check.
Yes, exactly.
Now, you were there for better part of a year, 2011, or a significant part of 2011.
9 months in country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in that time, did you start to notice, a significant difference in just the way you had to, things you perhaps took for granted in Canada, you couldn't there? Even day-to-day things and just the way people, perhaps a language barrier, was that an issue? What were some of these differences that you noticed?
Well, there was absolutely a language barrier. Everything had to be done through interpreters, which made things very difficult and very, very slow.
Yeah.
So you had to have a lot of patience and keep track of what you've been doing, because you move from one project to another and have to come back to that one again. So
I would think that would be challenging, and especially if you're trying to convey something that's very technical. There's always something lost in the translation, to use that expression, and notwithstanding the skills that translators have, which I couldn't imagine the task without a translator, but there's always something that's a little bit lost, because there's just that intrinsic knowledge that isn't able to be passed on as easily, because everything has to be filtered through the translator. So you're saying it slowed things down. Did it make you frustrated?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I'm used to doing things in a rather quick pace where I work here, but there it was glacial. We would have to, if we put in a training program, it would have to be translated into Dari and then go to be approved by somebody that did that sort of thing, and then back again in English, and it was glacial.
Glacial kind of sums it up. Just hideously slow. I'm wondering, did you question it all? Why am I here? Is what I'm doing having an impact or a value? Is there an end goal to this? Did you ever lose sight of that, or did you try to stay focused on that?
I think you think about that before you go. What your goals are personally, as well as what the goals are for the organization. And if you don't have any personal goals there, I don't know why you would want to do it. So
would you say, as much as anything, the notwithstanding the climatic change and all these other physical differences, it's the mental preparation that you felt was something you really needed to get a good handle on before you went over?
Oh, it's a culture shock for some people. I've seen other fellow Canadians that were there that had no previous military experience or anything like that. It's definitely a culture shock. So I think being prepared before you go over, either through your own experiences or through preparation by the organization that's sending you, is very important.
Did you have the benefit of others that had more experience in terms of serving there, and that you could talk to and ahead of time to get an idea of what to expect?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I talked to many of my fellow policemen here that have served in Afghanistan, and I was through the International Peace Operations Branch put into contact with other police officers that went there in a role of a police officer.
So you did have a sort of a peer group to be able to rely on and get some comfort level before you went over there. John, what do you think? There's a lot of differences of opinion on this, but what do you think generally, from your perspective, is the attitude of Canadians toward the role that Canada plays in other countries from the peacekeeping world in Afghanistan?
That's hard to answer without putting some of your own feelings in there as well.
Well, go ahead and put some of your own feelings. Well, you were there, you experienced. You're not. People who haven't been there aren't going to have the benefit of that firsthand feel of the culture and the people. So, by all means, group your answer with some of that personal experience.
Well, my personal experience, I found after not too long a period of time that possibly the goals that Canada was trying to reach there were far beyond the 2014 time span they're putting on it, possibly decades past. So my mission or whatever was to make a difference, or see where I can make a difference. And that's basically at a personal level. So when you're mentoring somebody or you're close to certain people in the organization, if you can see a change there or see improvement there, that's where the benefit, that's where you made you feel good about that. But the mission as a whole I think can be accomplished, but it's going to take decades.
I think your role there, helps open the eyes of many that there's just so many different things that have to be done with the help of outside countries like Canada and other countries that are serving there and have personnel deployed there. It's not just a couple of things. It's not just infantry. It's not just physical security of buildings and things. It's everything. It's the training and with the goal ultimately being so that those who live there can look after themselves and have a sustainable model of peace and whatnot for their country. Would you say that?
Absolutely. That's one of the missions of Canada for going there, and to promote the rule of law and gender rights and a number of very important things. But before you can get there, you've got to do the basics.
Yeah.
So
there's no shortcuts, is there?
There's no shortcuts, correct.
And perhaps that's why the 2014 date is, it's come up so quickly. Some Canadians who aren't as informed or perhaps don't have any firsthand information see this as, well, geez, we've been over there for all these years and it just seems like nothing ever changes. When in fact it has, but things don't change quickly. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at changing their culture, not just a few little things, and that takes generations. I don't know how they ever came up with this time frame, thinking they could do it within a couple of years.
Now, John, how did you you made the decision to go over there and use your expertise and share it with others, and notwithstanding the language barriers and all these other things, how did you counterbalance that with, you're going to be away from home for 9 months? You know, you're not just going out of town where you can commute back every couple of weeks. I mean, you're gone for 9 months. You're across the world here. You've left family, friends. That's a long time to be away from the comforts of a country that we have everything we need in. How did you process all of that?
Prior to leaving?
And then while you were there, like maybe the excitement was there for a few weeks, but after a while, maybe you woke up one day and, geesh, I still have 8 months to go. You know, that kind of thing. Did the loneliness, you know, being away from your family, how did that?
Well, being away from the family certainly had an effect. You know, you miss birthdays, and when I was in the Army back in the late 70s, it was writing a letter home. Now with Skype and all sorts of things, I was able to talk to my family almost every day.
Okay, so that was a bright light then. The technology and whatnot allowed you to communicate more regularly and not write a letter, then have to wait weeks before you heard a response and that sort of thing, or whether your letter was even going to make it to the destination. That's really interesting, and that really puts a perspective on the modernness of roles in other countries. It's you have to change with the times, and perhaps it makes the challenge bigger too. What you need to teach and mentor is a little more sophisticated than what it might have been 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Oh, I think you're right on that. As I said, and we talked about before, we have to remember the level that they're at when we're doing our training and making our plans and whatnot. I was in the command, control, and communication section, which does just that. We promoted command, control, and communications. So we went to the various police districts in Kabul. My district was the model, and we improved their command, control, and communications by giving them radios. And we thought that would be an easy thing. But when it came down to it, we had to teach the officers on the road how to use the radio. And it took, in some cases, they picked it up in seconds. Yeah. Other cases, it was 2 hours before we could get them to push and release the button when it's needed. Unfortunately,
things you take for granted, right?
Yes, unfortunately, that's some of the things that we're looking at.
So it's one thing to provide the tool; it's quite another for them to use it to its full capability.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, one final thought here: as you completed your 9 months there, what were you thinking? Did you feel a sense of accomplishment? Did you feel a sense of pride that you served as a Windsorite and a Canadian, and just that your time was worthwhile and appreciated? And be honest, how did you feel at the sort of the conclusion of things here?
Oh, very proud to have represented the Windsor and the Windsor Police Service, absolutely, and myself for that matter. Did I accomplish anything on a personal level? Like I said earlier, I feel that I made a few changes on an individual basis. Overall basis, I think I opened some eyes with some of my findings, I guess you would call it, about what we should be teaching and what we shouldn't be, and how we're, as we've talked about already, we're trying to teach them up here and they're down here. So in that respect, I hope that some of my remarks were to change some of our policy, I suppose you would say, or what we're doing over there.
Okay, well spoken. I think, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So your role is more of a lasting teach them to fish, not just give them the fish for the day. So John, on behalf of the Windsor Historical Society and Veterans Memories Project, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Horgan.
Okay. Hello, with me today is Tyler Millman. Tyler is a special constable here at the Windsor Police Service, and despite his youthful appearance, is also a veteran. Tyler, could you describe for us your role in your tour of Afghanistan?
Yeah, I was a part of a defense and security team that was out of Kandahar City, which is one of the lower provinces in Afghanistan. And my role there was to provide security to one of the local, forward operating bases within the city there. So it's surveillance and those types of things.
And you completed a tour of Afghanistan, but you're also in the reserves, and you you remain in that capacity. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah, I've been part of the reserves in the Essex and Kent Scottish for almost 12 years now.
Okay, so that obviously predates your time here at the Windsor Police Service, where you've been here less than 2 years. I'm just wondering, when you've been committed to something that long, military service, how do you, a young person, counterbalance your time spent in a new job here at Windsor Police with your ongoing commitment in the reserves, and also taking a tour of Afghanistan?
I think just having a supportive family, supportive friends, and always keeping that kind of end goal in mind for me was something that really kept me going through all the difficult and challenging times, schooling and going overseas. My end goal was always to work for the Windsor Police Service, so that definitely helped just to keep that in mind.
So you had an end goal in that respect in your civilian life, if I may use that term. Now, when you had to support a family, which is obviously very important. Veterans of all conflicts have had that as a common denominator, which is something that's wonderful, and it affects no two veterans the same, really. But was it consistent, or were there mixed feelings amongst some relatives that perhaps didn't understand, the perspective that you carried on this?
Obviously, my mom didn't want me to go when I first told her that I was going to be going overseas. She was worried for me going, but my fiance at the time and wife now, really supportive, also fearful and everything like that, but overall very supportive, and knew that it was something I wanted to do for a long time. I trained to do, so they were supportive through and through.
So when you went to Afghanistan, you were engaged to be married, but not married yet.
That's fair.
And so your fiance stuck it out with you and everything else, and you're married now.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Do you have any regrets? I mean, you've spent several months over there, no doubt. Any regrets about the whole experience? And don't be afraid to be honest here. I mean, it's not a bunch of candy and sugar here. This is we know that there's a lot of commitment and a lot of scary things that happen when you're away from home and in a situation like you were in.
To be honest, I don't have any regrets. It was it's a worthwhile experience. It was something that, again, I trained to do for a long time. I got to put that training into practice while I was over there and take that experience now to the job I currently hold.
That's a good point. Would you say that the events of September the 11th, 2001 shaped any of your reasoning for being involved in the military in your service?
Well, I joined June 26, 2001, so it was actually my first training night back from basic training. That it was September 11th, that was the day. So I joined prior to, and going forward, that was always something, that was the conflict that dominated most of my military career, and that was the one that a lot of my friends were going to Afghanistan. So I guess it didn't shape why I joined, but all the training was geared towards it, and it was, again, something that I got to put into practice at the end of the day. So
here you are, you're a young man. You join in June of 2001 when the world is a totally different place, really. Mm-hmm. And a few short months later, the events of 9/11 occur, and you've already sort of made the commitment, you've already jumped in with both feet, so to speak. Did your heart jump just a little bit when that happened, maybe with the realization of your role was a little bit more than just an average Canadian citizen? Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it changed what Canada's military was committed to at that point. So, and at that point, it was definitely something that I wanted to be a part of. What do you feel is unique about military service being a Canadian? I'm sure you especially when you're in Afghanistan, you ran into others serving from other countries, but you're a Canadian, you're serving as a Canadian. What do you feel is unique about that role of being a Canadian in service of military service abroad? I think every country's military has, they're proud of their country and proud to serve their country, and I don't know if it's anything unique, but it's for my service, and it just made me really proud to be Canadian and serve my country. So, the fact that Canada is sort of maybe not 100%, but I think there's a general consensus in the world that Canada is held in a position of neutrality, much like Switzerland has always held. When it comes to peacekeeping and those types of military assignments, Canada is very much held in esteem amongst world countries in their role, very standing up for the little guy, for those who can't defend themselves, and that's why we have operations in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Rwanda and all these other places post-World War II, post-Korea, post-Vietnam. Is that something that stirs anything up inside of you, knowing that you're a part of that?
You know, it makes me proud to know that I'm continuing on that legacy that so many before me, you know, helped create. Obviously very proud to serve not only my unit but my country, and that's fun.
Okay. What, Tyler, what would you say is, if you had to think about it really hard, what's the single greatest message or point that you feel your service experience stands out that you can relay to others of all ages, but particularly young people? Maybe a sense of purpose, or why you've done what you've done, and why others might be encouraged to follow.
I think, you know, after serving in Afghanistan, I think afterwards you appreciate everything that Canada is, even more so than you did before, more so than I did before I went. So even the small things, Canada's, you just know that Canada's a great place to live, great place to grow up, and so that sense of pride kind of goes up a bit after you serve in a place like that, and you realize how good Canada really is. So
would you say, it sounds like what you're saying is you gained perhaps a broader or clearer perspective until you served overseas. You kind of had an idea of things. Maybe you talked to other vets, others who had served prior to you in your own same company and things like that. But until you went there and lived it for several weeks and months, perhaps your perspective was different, and you appreciate things more.
Yeah,
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, yeah, you do. You appreciate the things that Canada has more after something like that.
I think it's important to note that our country is full of veterans of all ages and demographics that cover many conflicts, and there's no end point to that. As long as our country is going to be in existence, we're going to have a role to serve in a military capacity, and we need veterans of all ages to come forward and serve our country. And so thank you for your service to our country, Tyler. Appreciate it. With me today is Sean Rhodes. Sean is a police officer with the Windsor Police Service, has been so for approximately 2 years. But he has a unique past. He had military service as a full-time soldier for his country for approximately 16 years. Sean, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Barry.
Would you describe the role that you served in your 16 years as a soldier for the Canadian, for your country of Canada?
Certainly. I enrolled in '95, early '95. I was slated for light infantry. I served all my time at CFB Petawawa following my initial training. In '97, I was enrolled in airborne infantry. I served airborne infantry for 10 years at the same unit, so I had, was quite blessed that way. I didn't move around a lot at the beginning. Just in the new millennium there, I did selection for the Special Operations unit that formed in Petawawa. So I had a unique finish to my career. I spent the last 4 years of my career there. I retired as a warrant officer.
Now, I know there's not a lot of detail you can provide in your last assignment, and we understand that. But give us your role. You've now shifted to a quote-unquote normal life with a job and that sort of thing. What have you drawn on from your experience as a full-time soldier, though? Certainly not everybody that comes in to any profession, whether it's policing or accounting or law or whatever, has 16 years of full-time military service. What did that bring to the table, if I ever use that term?
Well, I'd hope that it helped me grow up. I struggle sometimes with perspective. I'd like to say that, I have friends that are teachers, bus drivers, auto workers. I always tell them in conversation, I say, well, you were educated and trained to do your job. I was as well. You have 17 years in your chosen career, and I do as well. A lot of people, because it's the military, because it's the Army, they think it's unique. I would think that every career is. So I don't think, I'm really any different than anybody else in that respect. However, to answer your question more specifically, it comes down to people, I think. In this job, there's a lot of times when you're dealing with people on the street every day, certainly for me, since I've started. I don't have a lot of experience here. I think 17 years of discipline, some of it you want, some of it you don't want. That's certainly helped me. Seeing the world, the travel that goes on, the deployments that go on, that can't hurt anybody, a world experience for sure. So the military provided some structured discipline, some structured education. That's almost 16 years of being on course, teaching on courses. It gives you that term, that life experience. Sometimes I take issue with that, but we all have our own life, our own experience. But I think it gave me the tools to deal with people. A little forbearance, a little patience, although sometimes I may not be called the most patient person, but yeah. So to deal with people, it's given me, I think, a lot of tools to do that.
Now you're, certainly there's some parallels between military service and law enforcement. You mentioned discipline, and that's a strong one. That not everybody has discipline. There's many that have a lack of discipline, and you would probably see that in both as a soldier and as a police officer. You mentioned some of the benefits. Your training, being a full-time soldier exposed you to different training techniques, equipment, skills, perhaps things that you might not have otherwise acquired had you chosen a different path. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Give me some examples of some of the things you did during your time, during your 16 years.
Wow. Lots. I have deployments internationally, nationally, and to different theaters. Right? As a soldier, you can deploy to the United States in a training role, work with other international organizations. I've had the benefit of training with Navy SEALs, U.S. Rangers, and other foreign nationals in Afghanistan. Right, the ANP, the ANA Commandos.
What does that stand for those who are?
Sorry, Afghanistan National Army.
Okay.
So Afghanistan National Police. So, a lot of different opportunities.
When you trained with these other organizations, obviously they had different perspective, different backgrounds in that. What were some of the challenges you found, or what were some of the synergies that you found that were beneficial? I'm sure you found examples of both.
Yes, when you first initially get into something like that, regardless, whether you're in Afghanistan, whether you're in a combat theater or you're in a training environment, in the United States or even in Canada, what you recognize right away, I think, is a common aim and a common drive to achieve the mission, right? And if the given mission is to train and to teach, regardless of where you come from, whether it's a police organization or a military one, everything else is secondary. So I was very surprised at the unity, and barring language barrier, cultural beliefs, regardless, when the uniform's on, the direction is one, and everybody's behind that. First and foremost, the greatest benefit to that is that everything else, the day-to-day challenges that you encounter, once everybody understands that what the mission is, and mission is first, everything else can work itself out.
So you're saying
very different.
If well understood, the mission is what glues everybody together, despite all your differences, your different perspectives and whatnot. That's the one common thread that keeps everybody on the same page.
I would say that, absolutely.
I noticed you use the term theater, which is interesting. I've heard that term before from other vets, and it's not a common term used in the manner in which you just used it. But it almost paints a picture that it's, for those of us who have not served directly in any capacity, military or otherwise, it's almost a surreal, and it's almost fittingly ironic that you use the term theater, which is, for those who have been there, that is the real thing. For those who haven't, it is hard to imagine it beyond a theatrical or...
It's an interesting interpretation of the word, yeah, it really fits.
I just find that the way you use it so naturally, it just gave me that picture that's You almost have to be there to truly appreciate all the differences and the uniqueness of that experience. You mentioned that you were very blessed to have served with the same group of colleagues over a lengthy period of time. I think you said 10 plus years or something.
Yes, the same unit, yeah.
And so, what are some of the benefits that brought? Maybe there's some drawbacks, but let's forget that for the moment and focus on the positive. What were some of the benefits of being able to serve with the same group of guys and great, colleagues at the same time?
Well, I think I'm finding the same thing with policing as well. There's certainly a parallel in that regardless of what you're doing, if you're all engaged as a same group, whether that's a group of 35 or 435, it becomes a family unit. And then family units support each other. It's familiar family units, like-minded family units. So this is a similarity, as you mentioned before, parallels between policing and military. For sure, that's very comfortable for me and comforting to me is that you serve a certain length of time with the same people, regardless of, again, whether it's 35 or 435. That becomes a family unit, and as dysfunctional as families can be, they have a way of functioning and getting through things. So certainly that's similar here. So with 10 years with the same group, not only myself, but my family, my children were able to, form friends and support groups and all those things, those necessities that you need outside of occupation. So yeah, I say blessed, I was, and that hasn't stopped here. I happen to be further blessed to come back to my hometown and serve here, so.
For someone who's only been a police officer for 2 years, your whole persona tells me a person who's far more experienced. And I'm thinking it is your military training was a big part of that. I know that your dad was a police officer. He rose to the rank of inspector, and you're following in the footsteps of your dad here. What was the perspective of your parents, your dad, and others, other family members on your service military? Where they must have had an opinion and that sort of thing. Were they encouraging of you pursuing that?
Yes, I don't think anybody at any reach in my immediate family or extended family ever had anything negative to say. There was a lot of support. There was a lot of pride. I think you'll find commonly, and this has been my experience, that Essex County has a very rich tradition. And when you use the word tradition in the military, that's heavy. There's tragedy in tradition. There's pride. So no, when I chose to join, my father already passed away, but certainly on my mother's side there was former veterans. My grandfather was in the Canadian Navy, World War II. But I was kind of the first in my family. But no, nothing but support. Every parent, now that I am one, I can say, at some point you lose fear for yourself, and it's fears for your children. But no, I think my mom was very proud of that, and a lot of support. I think some of that's local. I think some of that's community. Not to say that every other community in Ontario, in Canada, has that same tradition. So, we're a great country based on our recent history, maybe the last 100 years. I think there's a lot of support for that.
I think it's important the evolution of military and policing service to those who've served in either or both of those capacities, like yourself. It's become very politicized, and sometimes it's hard to make the decision. You have a passion for both. It's obvious from talking to you, but it's not as cut and dry as it used to be, where it was. I'm going to say, just from talking to my dad, who was a World War II vet, more societally acceptable. Whereas now there's a lot more differing opinions, and some of these opinions are strong, and that doesn't make them wrong necessarily, but they're out there, and I think it makes a challenge for a young person to commit to serving their country, and then also turning around after they've done that service time and turn around and serve their community as a police officer. It's not something that's easy to do, but I think the benefits of your military experience certainly are going to weigh heavily in your policing career, and that's why when you say you're only a 2-year officer, it just seems like I'm talking to someone who's a 20-year officer. You look young, but we're
referring back to my age again.
Your voice of experience belies that completely. So, is there a single message or point you want to make to those who are watching this as to what you feel your military service stands for, that you could relate to others, particularly young people, but people of all ages? If you had to